Hi, my name is Annabelle Acosta, and I'm a senior in the program on the environment here at University of Washington. I did my senior capstone project on delivering defensible space best practices for selecting applicants. So I'm from California, and like Washington, we have seen more frequent and more intense wildfires in recent years. For one example, the Dixie Fire, which burned to the size of Cape Cod and is now burning to the size of Delaware. And another example from this summer, the Cedar Creek and Cub Creek fires, which surrounded the Metro Valley here in Washington State. And you can see a picture of that down on the bottom left of the screen. So we're seeing these more frequent, more intense wildfires, which brings into question, how do we prepare? And not everyone can, because preparation resources are inaccessible. They take time, money, physical demand, etc. But fire preparedness NGOs, such as Fire Adapted Metro Valley, who I interned with this summer, have the potential to help their community become more prepared in the face of climate change and bridge some of these inequities in preparation resources. So organizations like the Metro Valley will have the huge responsibility to decide who is prepared and who is not, which leads us into my research question: how should applicants to a need-based fire-safe program be selected and prioritized? So this summer, again, I interned with Fire Adapted Metro Valley, and this is located on the more dry, more fire-prone eastern slope of the Cascades. It's also located about 4.5 hours away from Seattle, and I have a little map in the top left-hand corner of the big fire map, which shows its relevant location to Seattle. So in addition to researching my research question, I also looked at programmatic improvements to the Equitable Risk Mitigation Program, which attempts to do just what I mentioned before: bridge the gap in preparation and bring resources to those in need. I researched how to select applicants by conducting interviews with fire-safe programs in California, Colorado, and Montana who ran programs similar to the Equitable Risk Mitigation Program. And these interviews gave me a great footing in how other programs have been successful in selecting applicants. However, I knew I wanted to apply these more broader findings to the Metro Valley specifically, and I did so by interviewing need-based assistance organizations in the Metro Valley, as well as pilot EMP recipients. Lastly, I conducted a literature review of relevant publications. So my methods lead me into 4 factors which should be considered when selecting applicants into a need-based fire preparedness program. Most importantly, the level of need of the applicant should be considered. Those who face the most barriers to preparation should be prioritized. So barriers specific to the region of fire preparedness program should be identified in this process. And I had the chance to do this over the summer in the Metro Valley. So in the Metro Valley, it's common to have someone who is, a senior citizen, also a veteran, living on Social Security, up a very hard, very small road to get up. So this would make it more difficult for them to adapt to and prepare for wildfire, and also makes them more vulnerable when in the face of wildfire, if a fire engine cannot go up their drainage, help their home, and save it potentially from wildfire. So next, availability of funding. You should be considered. So if there's a specific grant that is available that applies to an applicant or group of applicants, it should be pursued before others. Next, scale. So if you can perform mitigation work on multiple neighboring homes, this creates a better level of preparation and can create a fire block in some instances. And lastly, availability of services. So they should be standardized by providing a list of available services, and this will make the prescription and like the defensible space process much more efficient and less overwhelming as well for property owners. And this is a very difficult process for many people, as these wildfire events have caused PTSD in certain instances. Okay, so those are my findings, and these do come with implications. And there are three main implications of these findings. And I did not mention these as original ideas. There are plenty of examples of how they are being implemented within the Metro Valley itself. So communication between rural communities and government services is incredibly important to build trust and improve preparedness efforts. As an example, in the Metro Valley currently, 2 state agencies are working with a local facilitator who is engaging the community to develop a wildfire resiliency plan tailored to each specific neighborhood. Next, collaboration between nonprofits to decrease competition of funding should be prioritized, especially in a place like the Metro Valley where there's a high concentration of nonprofit organizations. An example of this is the Okanagan Conservation District and Fire Adapted Metro Valley's communication around an intent to apply for grants and support one another when the other is applying. And lastly, programs like the EMP are an emerging area of wildfire risk mitigation. To ensure this important work is pursued, we must support dependable and consistent funding for such programs. So I'd like to thank my wonderful site supervisor and faculty advisor, Kat and Lubna, as well as the director of Fire Adapted Metro Valley, Nancy Farr, my family and friends, and everyone who gave their time to me, especially during this tough summer, experiencing 2 major wildfires in Washington state and a bunch of awful and devastating wildfires in California and Colorado. So thank you all, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.